Mientras tanto, para analizar todo esto y mucho más, tenemos como todos los jueves con nosotros a Jay Kaeppel, analista internacional, en este caso Senior Research Analyst at sentimenttrader.com. How are you, Jay? Thank you for coming again.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Well, talking first of all about the semiconductor industry, during the recent days we saw during 2023 we saw a very nice rally from semiconductors, but right now in the last days we're seeing quite hard resistance for this industry. What do you think about this?
So to kind of preface that first chart, the way it always works in the markets is you get periods of strong trends, and then you get what we're looking at right now, which is choppy, sideways, volatile action. And that's in stocks, in bonds, in gold, the US dollar, you name it, everything is kind of chopping around right now, which causes a lot of uncertainty for investors and traders. And so what we try to do is look for clues. And so the semiconductor industry is a very good bellwether of the overall market. If the semiconductor industry, and I use ticker SMH, which is a ETF that tracks an index of semiconductor stocks, when that's performing well, almost invariably the overall market is performing well, and vice versa. So what we saw, the top part of that chart is a long-term chart for SMH, a huge rally into the top in 2021, a bear market last year, and then a big rally since October of 2022 into July of this year, and now it's kind of bumped its head. And so the bottom chart kind of zooms in on a daily basis, and we see what happened. It tried to break through, and it failed. So very simple. If you want to know if the bull market is still intact, keep an eye on SMH. If and when it breaks out to the upside, that will be your clue that we're ready for another up leg. In the meantime, as long as that stays below there, it's a negative for the market. And on a short-term trading basis, if I were trading SMH, I would be playing the short side as long as it's below that red line.
Very interesting, Jay. We'll keep an eye on the semiconductor industry about that resistance right now. And also another asset to talk about is the US dollar. The recent rally during the last days, we saw the Dixie index raising from 99.58 more or less to 102 right now. And what do you think about the US dollar? Do you think it's it's gaining again some momentum? Or?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the second chart, what's really important to note in this one is the top is ticker UUP, which is an exchange-traded fund that tracks the US dollar, and the bottom is the S&P 500 stock index. And what we can see very clearly is the inverse nature of these two indexes, these two securities. So it was not a coincidence that last year in October, when the dollar topped out and started falling, all of a sudden that's when the stock market began to get moving. But what we see at the very far right is now the dollar has started, as you mentioned, to tick higher. And again, it's not a coincidence. The stock market all of a sudden is now having a problem. So again, we're looking for clues. One of the easiest ones to keep track of is the US dollar. If it starts to break down, that will be good for stocks and possibly gold and commodities. And if it keeps rallying and starts moving much higher, then it's going to be a bad sign for stocks and commodities.
Very interesting, Jay. And I think we have an inverse US dollar model you have for tracking this bullishness or bearishness about the US dollar.
Yeah, so I talk about, you get periods of choppiness. So in this, the top part of this third chart is an inverse model that I follow, that I created to keep track of the dollar. And when it is rising, in other words, when the 5-week moving average is above the 30-week moving average, that tends to be bearish for the dollar and vice versa. But it's a trend following tool, so it tends to be wrong at the bottom and wrong at the top. So what we've seen, the model itself has been bearish for some time, but recently the dollar kind of put in a bottom, and you can see it there, that green line, and now it started to rally. So I can't predict which way this is going to go. If I'm going to play right now, the model that I follow objectively is bearish the dollar, so I'm hoping that it will break back down. And again, if and when it does, that will be a clue that the bull market in stocks may reassert itself.
Very interesting. I think we can also talk also about the gold, because normally it tends to trade inversely to the US dollar. So Jay, if the US dollar continues to be bearish, do you think the gold could surprise to the upside? What happens also about seasonality? As always, we check this on sentimenttrader.com, as always on your charts also.
Right. So this last chart, the fourth chart, the gold market has basically been sideways for over 3 years now. It rallied to a high in 2000, and it's tried several times to get through. And I think I talked about this about a month or so ago. I probably showed the same chart. There's an argument. Are we looking at what is typically a bullish formation referred to as a cup with handle? And when it breaks out to the upside, then you tend to get a very big rally. Or are we looking at a multiple top that's going to lead to a bearish decline? The truth is, I can't predict. And in fact, most of what I follow is essentially neutral gold. So I don't have a position. However, if it's going to run, what we see at the bottom is seasonality for the annual seasonal trend for gold. And the important thing to remember, seasonality is not a roadmap. It's a history of tendencies. But the point is, if gold is going to make a run at that old high and maybe break through, we would look for it to do that sometime in the near future, between now and say early to mid-October. And so that's a big clue. If it breaks out to the upside, it could run a long way. At this point, I have no position until that happens.
We'll talk on that later on the next weeks, if this cap and handle breaks on the upside. Thank you very much, Jay Kaeppel, Senior Research Analyst at sentimenttrader.com. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Y nosotros rápidamente, antes de despedirnos, resumimos lo que ha dicho Jay Kaeppel desde sentimenttrader.com. Como siempre, todas las semanas nos trae gráficos muy interesantes. Arrancamos con el primer gráfico. Nos dice que vigilemos de cerca la industria de semiconductores. ¿Por qué? Porque va a ser la responsable de determinar la durabilidad del mercado alcista. Mientras el sector de semiconductores, como pueden ver en pantalla, siga mejorando, entonces el mercado alcista tiene pie a sostenerse. Pero fíjense que el sector de semiconductores desde hace unos días ha topado con una resistencia. Poco a poco le está costando romper esos máximos, esa resistencia que tiene ahí marcada en la parte de abajo, lo que podría significar un potencial doble techo. Decía Jay Kaeppel que a partir de aquí pues hay que ver si es una formación, por ejemplo, podría ser una formación cap and handle, donde primero tienes un rechazo en el techo y luego intentas la rotura, o potencialmente podría seguir bajando. Dice que si el sector semiconductores se mantiene débil, el mercado en general debería mantenerse débil también, mientras que si el semiconductores rompe máximos finalmente, pues será una buena señal para el mercado. Otro sitio donde mirar dice que es el dólar estadounidense. Hasta hace poco, bueno, ahora mismo ya saben que el dólar estadounidense, sobre todo si miramos correlación a corto plazo, está prácticamente inversamente correlacionado con el mercado. Si el dólar baja, el mercado tiende a subir; si el dólar sube, el mercado tiende a bajar, sobre todo en el último año, donde ha sido muy marcado por la pauta de subidas de tipos de interés y hasta dónde tenía que apretar la Reserva Federal. Sea como sea, en el tercer gráfico, Jay Kaeppel nos dice que, según su modelo, todavía le apunta a que el dólar está en tendencia bajista, pese al repunte que hemos visto del índice dólar en los últimos meses. Eso sí, está intentando girarse el modelo, pero todavía apunta a la baja. Cuando se gire, pues nos avisará aquí en Negocios Televisión. Esto le apunta a la baja, lo que querría decir que incluso con el rebote que hemos visto del dólar, todavía hay cierto riesgo de que el dólar siga corrigiendo en las próximas semanas o próximos meses. Mientras tanto, los inversores se preguntan, cuando el dólar corrige, algo que tiende a hacerlo bien es el oro, porque está denominado también en dólares. Pues nos trae un gráfico sobre el oro y nos dice que, bueno, la estacionalidad ahora mismo sugiere que si el oro rompe máximos, el momento estacional favorito para el oro serían los meses de octubre y también de noviembre, donde tiene una estacionalidad, como pueden ver, muy fuerte. La estacionalidad hasta ahora era muy débil, pero la estacionalidad de octubre y noviembre tiende a ser mucho más fuerte, y además está todavía pendiente de romper la resistencia de máximos después de una formación que nos dice Kaeppel sería un cap and handle, una formación, un patrón bastante alcista si se consiguen romper los máximos. Así que la señal sería una rotura de máximos, dice Jay, a partir de ahí él abriría posición y vendría acompañada también de en un momento en el que podría coincidir estacionalmente siendo muy positivo. Cuando esto ocurra, por supuesto, también nos lo contará aquí en Negocios Televisión. Hasta aquí la entrevista que le hemos hecho al Senior Research Analyst de sentimenttrader.com. Nosotros nos despedimos, enseguida en media hora conectamos de vuelta a las 8. Noticias del día en panorama completo aquí en Negocios.